In this video, I'm going to show you guys the budget Zwift setup that I've used to ride 2,600 miles in my living room. I'm going to go through each product one by one, explaining why I got what I did, if I think it's worth it, or if I think that you should upgrade. Let's get into it. So, as I said, I have it in my living room. And before I go into any of the individual products, I wanted to give you guys a quick tip. If you can, I would highly recommend leaving this set up, because if I had to put my bike on the trainer, get the fan out, wheel the desk in, roll the mat out, all of this stuff, the friction to train would just be too high. By leaving it up, it takes me less than a minute to get on, get it all set up, and start riding. So getting into the gear itself, I think that there are three main essentials. The bike, obviously, the trainer itself, and a high quality fan. Starting with the trainer, I have a Zwift Hub Classic. I paid $499 for it. It's a direct drive smart trainer, which means that you have to take the back wheel of the bike off and the trainer hooks up directly to the bike. So this particular trainer has a max resistance of 1,800 watts, which I am not even close to. It also has a power meter accuracy of plus or minus 2.5%, which for someone like me, just an amateur endurance athlete, I don't really need anything more than that. It also has a maximum grade simulation of 16%, which means that if you were outdoors riding a hill with 16% grade, that is what this is able to represent in the virtual world of Zwift. So the Zwift Hub Classic requires the correct cassette size to match what my bike has itself. But since this one came out, Zwift has made a new model called the Wahoo Kicker Core Hub 1 or Wahoo Kicker Core Zwift Hub 1, something like that. It's a terrible name, but they've come out with a model that fits any bike, 8 to 12 speeds, well, almost any bike. And the beautiful thing about that is that you don't need a fancy bike to put it on the Zwift trainer, right? You can get any bike that fits you, and that is super important. But if you have a bike that fits you, you can throw it on the Zwift and then you're good to go, right? Your bike doesn't have to be light, it doesn't have to be fancy or nice, it doesn't even have to have brakes, right? Because we're just sitting still. So I quickly wanted to also compare a direct drive trainer, which like I said is hooked up directly to the bike and requires the back wheel to be off. I wanted to compare that with a wheel on trainer. So you could Zwift with a wheel on trainer, but I don't recommend it. And I definitely think it's worth the upgrade to the direct drive trainer for 3 reasons. The first is that the wheel on trainers are much louder. The second reason is that during hard efforts like sprints, the back wheel can actually slip on the trainer. The third reason is that it is far less realistic than the direct drive trainers. So like I said, you could use a wheel on trainer, but if you can afford it, I would definitely recommend the direct drive trainer. So moving on to the bike, I have a Cannondale Topstone 1. It's an aluminum frame gravel bike with a carbon fork and disc brakes. Ultimately, I went with a gravel bike for maximum versatility. It's got mounts all over it for things like bike packing, and it has this insane tire clearance here. You could fit tires that are up to like 2 inches or something insane like that. But yeah, I just wanted something super versatile so that I could do a lot of stuff on it. In addition to the high versatility that I just mentioned, I also wanted a gravel bike because it has more of a relaxed geometry than something like a road bike. So what that means is that when you ride a bike like this, you're sitting more upright. With a lot of road bikes or racing bikes especially, you're kind of hunched over the handlebars because it's more of an aero position. But with something like this, you're sitting more upright and it's a lot more comfortable for those long sessions. So the fan I use is a Lasco high velocity utility fan. And a good fan is super important for an indoor cycling setup. The reason is that when you ride outdoors, you get a lot of cooling just from the air on your body that indoors you don't get. So I think this one is between $80 and $100. I'll put the current prices for all this stuff in the description, but I went with this one because it's super powerful. It puts out 289 cubic feet per minute of air, and 90% of the time, I only use this fan on a level 2. I only really put it up on level 3 if I'm doing a hard workout or an FTP test. 90% of the time, like I said, I'm on level 2. You can adjust the angle of the fan just like this, and when I'm riding, I place it about here and point it so that it hits my chest and upper body while riding. As I go through these products and some of the other ones too, I'm gonna compare them to some of the more expensive options that are cycling specific. So the more expensive fan that I'm gonna compare this one to is the Wahoo Headwind. It's a $300 fan, which sounds absolutely crazy, but the reason it's so expensive is that you can control the speed with an app, or you can pair it to your smart trainer and the fan speed will change based on your in-game Zwift speed or your heart rate. And they say that the Wahoo Headwind gets up to 30 miles per hour, but they don't actually give the CFM for it. So what a lot of people do with dumb fans like this one is they'll get a smart plug, and the smart plug allows you to turn it on with your phone if you forget to turn it on before you start riding. Honestly, I rarely, if ever, forget to turn my fan on before I start riding, but if I did, I don't think I would really mind just getting off and turning it on. So for the price, I love this fan. I personally wouldn't upgrade to the Wahoo Headwind unless money was like absolutely no object. One last reason that I love this fan is that it has 2 power outlets, which the Wahoo fan does not have. So I love these outlets for a couple of reasons. They allow something like my laptop to be plugged in at all times. So if I'm Zwifting on the laptop, or if I'm watching a show or movie or something like that, it won't die, which is super nice. If you wanted to add another small fan to put on the desk, you could totally plug it in right here and then plop the fan right here so that it's just blowing right on your face. So moving on from the 3 essentials that I was talking about, the trainer itself, the bike, and a good quality fan, let's talk about the sort of nice to haves. And I want to start by talking about the trainer desk. The desk that I use is a Rad Cycles trainer desk. So this desk is $120, and I'm going to be comparing it to the Wahoo desk, which is $300. And this desk has a couple of really nice features that the Wahoo one just doesn't have. For starters, this one has 2 cup holders, which I use literally every single ride, and it also has these locking caster wheels, which is super nice because if you reach and grab a bottle, you don't want the desk to be sliding away from you while you're riding. So if you look at the Amazon reviews of this desk, almost everyone has the same problem when putting it together. The holes right here where the legs come into, they don't line up with where the legs want to go. So to make it work, I had to force this leg into the hole and duct tape it together. Compared to the Wahoo desk, this one is definitely not as aesthetically pleasing, but it's less than half the price. So if you ask me, this is definitely the way to go. So now let's talk about the mat that all of this is on top of. The brand of mat that I have is Super Mats. It's $40 on Amazon, and the reason that I went with this one compared to the $80 kicker mat is because the kicker mat is 6 inches wider and 6 inches longer. I wanted a compact mat so that it would fit better in this space. So this particular mat, it doesn't have the greatest durability. As you can see here, when I turn the wheel while riding, even just a little bit, it eats up the mat, and it's been getting these little bits of foam all over the place. So definitely not ideal, but this mat keeps sweat off the floor. It keeps everything from sliding around. It also keeps it a little bit quieter by reducing vibration. So it definitely does the job in that regard. So I started Zwifting on my MacBook Pro here, and I was watching TV over there. But what I've found is that by constantly sitting over here and turning my head towards the TV, to watch something, it was super uncomfortable over long periods of time. So what I ended up doing is getting an Apple TV so that I could Zwift on the Apple TV and then watch a podcast or movie or TV show on the laptop. And this is another one of those tips to help increase your comfort while riding. So by just watching something that's right in front of me, I didn't have to crane my neck, and it was way more comfortable to do longer Zwift sessions. So although it's definitely a splurge item to get something like an Apple TV, it definitely increases the comfort for long rides. One aspect of riding indoors that can make it super uncomfortable is the decreased amount of motion and movement that your bike and body have. To add a little bit more motion when I ride indoors, I got these pieces of foam right here. So originally, this was a larger piece of foam for gardening or yoga or exercise or something like that, but I cut it into quarters and put it underneath the contact points of the bike. So what this foam does is while I'm riding, it compresses on either side and gives me some natural motion while riding. It's definitely not as good as riding outside, but for $20 for this piece of foam, it is such a major improvement. So one other thing I wanted to mention is this little piece of plastic right here. This is a disc brake spacer. So disc brakes are what's called self-adjusting. When you squeeze on the brakes, the brake pads themselves close, and normally they'll close on the disc, which is a good thing because it means that they adjust so that they're in the proper position each time you need to brake. However, when you take the back wheel off, if you squeeze the brakes, the brake pads will close up and get stuck, and it's really hard to get them apart. So these are $7.99 for a pack of 6 on Amazon, and honestly, they're a lifesaver. So it's just this little piece of plastic here that you put in between the brake pads so that if you accidentally squeeze the brakes while the back wheel is off, the self-adjusting brake pads don't close on themselves and get stuck. So although the Zwift Hub has a built-in power meter, I also ride with a heart rate strap. The reason I do that is because power is a measure of external output, whereas heart rate is a measure of internal exertion. Although you can certainly train with power alone, I think that training with power and heart rate provides the most comprehensive view of your fitness. If you train with either of these but not both of them, it's much easier to either undertrain or overtrain. This particular heart rate monitor is the Polar H10. It's the gold standard for chest heart rate straps. So for $90, this is super worth it. So that is everything in my budget Zwift setup that I've used to ride 2,600 miles in my living room. Like I said, I'll leave links to all of this stuff down in the description. If you have any questions about Zwift, endurance training, or any of the products that I mentioned in this video, ask it down below in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video or found it valuable, please consider liking, commenting, or subscribing. Other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.